Welcome to the second session of the three-part Billboard series. The Billboard lease product is designed to create an order template containing the details of the lease. A macro is then run to process all leases of the same type, as a batch or a recurring basis. Macro copies these templates, updates the statuses based on the billing date, and produces a new order each new lease date. The purpose of creating a new order with each billing cycle is to distribute lease incomes into the correct accounting periods. The product will also allow for direct order creation, as that may be a requirement for the lease process. A bit of intelligence is built into the product to ensure its inclusion in the billing process at the correct time, with the correct detail, and for the correct amount. The process may seem complex at first, however, minimum amount of input is required for a lease, and the system then takes care of keeping up with it. Now we will look at an order entry process. Let's select New Order from the Start page.
It is generally a good idea to select your customer before adding items to the order. From the Company tab, select or add your customer in the usual manner. In some companies, a specific salesperson is responsible for lease orders that may not be a customer's default salesperson. If this is the case, move to the Totals tab and select the correct salesperson. Now move to the Items tab and expand the category for Billboard Lease. Open the pricing form with a double click. Begin with the Billboard ID list. You may either open the list and scroll through to find the billboard, or if you know the ID, you may type in the first few characters and then open the list. This will position you at the first occurrence of the combination you typed. Highlight your selection. Note the information that was entered in the part populates the form. The upper panel and the first column contain the default values established for the lease. This may be changed or overwritten. We will discuss them in detail in just a moment.
The panel in the third column contains record information about the billboard selected. It cannot be edited on the pricing form. This display allows the user to verify the selection list and its details. Most of this information also displays on the printed invoice and/or the work order. Back to the first column, the billing cycle for the billboard selected is now set to 28 days. The billboard cycle for the billboard selected is now set to monthly, and a charge of $250 per month. If a different cycle is required, open the selection list and select one of the available options, and then adjust the period rate accordingly. Let's select 28 days for the billing cycle, and we'll just keep the $250 period rate. A word of caution: the batch processing of orders from a template must be initiated by a user each time it is run. Before selecting a different cycle option, confirm it is currently on a schedule for processing. We'll discuss this in detail in the third part of this series. The next entry, lease term, refers to the length of the lease. If this 28-day lease were to cover a year, the term would be set to 13. 13 28-day periods equal 164 days. The next entry is the lease start date. To facilitate batch processing, all leases per cycle type should start and end on the same day. For month-based leases, the calculation is straightforward, correlating to a day rather than a date. For example, the first day of each month or the first day of each quarter. For day-based leases, each cycle type requires a reference date to count from. This value is set on the part and determines a valid start date based on the cycle type.
The second panel of the first column contains a calculator that generates a valid start date according to the type of lease selected. When the increment counter is set to 0, the calculator assumes the lease will start with the next cycle period and return to that value. For those occasions where the lease increases a partial up in progress or the lease is sold in advance, the calculator can increment forward or backward. Let's assume this board is nearing the end of a current lease that will be renewed with this contract and is in the middle of the second to last period of the current lease. We would need to start the next lease, not with the new billing period, but one after. Advance the counter to 1, ours is already there, and tab away from the field. The new date will be calculated and entered into the start date field by default. For another instance, let's assume that your contract includes the remainder of this current period. Decrement the counter to -1 and tab away. The start date now includes the current period. Be aware that entering a date directly into the start field overrides its formula, and the calculator will no longer populate the field automatically.
We will reset the counter to 0. Viewing the third panel in the first column, there is information related to face or graphic changes. Where the charges are agreed to at a fixed price, the value for each would be entered in the amount field, and the Build Separately button selected. Viewing the third panel in the first column, there is information related to face or graphics. Note, the pre-tax price is also 0, as nothing is due at this time. The first billing after the start date will reflect the values as of that date. The current period will show 1, and the remaining periods 12. And the pre-tax price will display the $250 due. For each subsequent billing, the current period will increment by 1, and the remaining period will de-increment by 1 until the lease is complete. Viewing the third panel in the first column, there is information on face or graphic changes agreed to as part of the lease. Entries here do not affect a price change and are meant to record the terms of the lease in the contract only. If you do not intend to use this product to produce the contract, you may wish to ignore these fields. The first entry is for the number of changes agreed to, where the brackets are included as a part of the lease amount. The contract price value would be left blank, and the included button selected. Where the charges are agreed to at a fixed price, the value for each would be entered into the amount field, and the Build Separately button selected. All detail cross and charges related to the face change would be handled as a separate product using a graphic print product.
Moving to the second panel of the second column, there are options for deposits, prepayments, and prepayment methods. Understand these options only affect the order status and invoice values. Entry and reconciliation of payment is handled after the invoice is created, as you normally would in a separate process. If a deposit is retained with the lease, the amount is entered here, where the total lease amount is received and will be reconciled in a single accounting period. Select the Pay in Full button. This is only necessary if you wish to print an invoice with each period for your customer's records. A paid in full order may be produced as a normal order without creating a template.
If the deposit is to be credited to one or more periods, enter the deposit amount and select Apply Credit Monthly. Where the deposit is sufficient, each billing will be reduced to the full amount until the deposit is exhausted. When the deposit is less than a full period, a partial bill will be created. The Billing Options section is designed to place notes on the printed invoice in large, bold, red print. When a batch is run, all invoices are printed. The note on each invoice directs the accounting department on how to handle the invoice. If the invoice option is selected, no notice is printed and the invoice follows normal practice. All other options print the note and require additional processing to distribute and or pay the invoice. The final options to cover is printing a contract. If the box is checked, print a contract at 0 months, the sum review of the order will display a predefined contract for the lease. Here we can see print a contract at 0 months is checked. Here the current period is 0 and the period remaining is 13. Go to Summary. Here we can see the predefined contract. The contract will always bill your company information, your customer information, and the terms of the lease. After the template is saved, you may print copies of the contract for signature and for your customers' records. With the details of the lease complete, we will close the pricing form and save the template. From the Action toolbar on the right, open the Save Options list by selecting the drop-down and select Save as Recurring Order. You will be prompted to select the recurrence type and then select OK. Once the recurring order or template is created, a new tab will appear for recurrence at the top of the order screen. Select Edit from the Action toolbar, and then select the Recurrence tab. Make sure you set the start date for the recurrence slightly in advance for the start date and the end date slightly in the rear of the leased end date to ensure inclusion, and then save the changes. You may want to check with the accounting department for when the invoices are processed and the number of days leeway required. In event you have created the lease template after the fact and require one invoice for a batch that has already run, clone the recurring order, edit it if necessary, and save as a normal order. Subsequent orders will be processed in the batch. This concludes the order entry section for the Billboard product.